Tonight we slip under a canvas tent somewhere near the foggy fields of Austerlitz. The damp air clings to your skin, your boots squelch in sticky mud, and above all else, you're exhausted. Your eyes are heavy, your limbs ache, but none of that matters. Because the little man with the enormous ego and matching hat refuses to go to sleep. Napoleon Bonaparte, the master of Europe, is pacing again. He's wide awake, chewing on a glove, muttering battle plans, and snapping his fingers every 3 minutes. No one dares suggest a nap. You shift in your cot, trying to get comfy, but his footfalls grow louder. He hasn't slept more than 3 hours in 2 days. Unfortunately, neither have you. Welcome to the Sleepless Empire. You're about to discover how the world's most famous general accidentally became the godfather of alarm clocks. And no, not the polite digital kind with low Fi rain sounds. We're talking mechanical contraptions with bells so aggressive they could probably rouse the dead. You probably won't survive this timeline without earplugs. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who's joining us from where, and how late you're up. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Napoleon doesn't sleep. That's your first problem. He claims sleep is for cowards, or worse, civilians. And while some historians argue whether he actually got by on 2 hours or just liked the idea of seeming superhuman, you're living the reality: endless wakefulness in the heart of a military encampment. Horses huff and stamp in the background. A lantern swings with the wind. And still, you wait for your next command. You're one of his trusted aides, though trusted feels like a stretch when you're mostly there to be yelled at when the sun rises a minute too late. He wants reports at 3 a.m. sharp. And not roughly 3 a.m. Not first light. He means exact hours. And he means them loudly. Here's the problem: it's the early 1800s. Precision timekeeping is still a luxury for astronomers and rich old men who collect pocket watches like some people collect cats. Out here, in the field, you've got sundials and church bells and maybe a pocket watch if you didn't drop it in a puddle last week. None of it is good enough for Napoleon. The man is obsessed with order, and time is just another battlefield. So naturally, his insomnia becomes a matter of national security. Your entire tent detachment, half asleep and wholly resentful, is now engaged in a daily ritual called Guess What Time It Is. You rotate watches. You argue over the stars. One of the junior officers tries to use rooster crows as a measure, which might have worked if the rooster weren't tragically eaten by a cavalry horse. Yes, that really happened. Military horses were opportunistic. Still, Napoleon paces. Every night he draws up his battle maps, muttering about flanks and artillery and the betrayal of light. Then, just as you drift off, he'll ring a bell, one of the many he's started keeping on a string by his cot, and demand a briefing. Doesn't matter if you were dreaming about buttered bread or home. You're up now. And you'd better know what time it is. Here's a mainstream historical fact to make this all feel a bit more official. During the lead-up to the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, Napoleon was known for personally overseeing every logistical detail, down to troop movement schedules measured in the tightest increments possible for the era. His sleep habits. Infamously erratic. Reports say he often napped in short bursts, claiming 6 hours for a man, 4 for a general, and none for Napoleon. Charming. But fringe anecdote time. One of Napoleon's secretaries later wrote that he once saw the emperor try to calculate sunrise using the length of a candle stub. Just sat there, staring at it, doing math, and muttering in Corsican. Historians still argue whether Napoleon's time obsession was tactical genius or a sign of slowly unraveling sanity. Some say he craved control, others suspect he simply couldn't turn his brain off long enough to relax. But for you, back in this tent, neither theory matters. All that matters is whether you'll be the one he wakes tonight. And, lucky you, it's your turn to guard the hourglass. Literally. You have an hourglass. Sand trickling. You're rotating it every hour. It's deeply unscientific. And honestly, it just makes you sleepier. So you start scheming. If only there were a way to build anything that could chime at a specific moment. Not when the sun rises. Not when someone roosters. But when you want it. Exactly when you want it. Something loud, yes, but also automatic. You're not a clockmaker, but you know someone who is. Sergeant Henri Leclerc. Bit of a tinkerer. Once rigged a musket to spit wine instead of bullets as a prank, which Napoleon did not find amusing. But Leclerc also fixed a Swiss general's broken watch using nothing but a bayonet and a wad of cheese. He might be just mad enough to help. You make your pitch over watery coffee and hard bread. What if, you say, you could build a clock that screams? Leclerc tilts his head. His moustache twitches. You've piqued his curiosity. And thus begins the most sleep-deprived collaboration in military history. Your first attempt is embarrassing, a candle with nails stuck in it, so they drop and clink into a pot when it burns down. It mostly just starts a fire. Second try. A tin pan and a string tied to a sleeping goat. Don't ask. Eventually, you'll stumble onto something semi-functional. But we're not there yet. For now, Napoleon paces, and the rest of you dream of a future with just 10 more minutes of sleep. Even just 5. By now, you're running on crumbs and stubbornness. The Empire might be conquering Europe, but your personal battle is against gravity every time your eyelids fall shut. Napoleon's sleep schedule? Still non-existent. And tonight, he's added a new twist. He wants a progress report at exactly 2:47 a.m. 2:47. Not 2:40. Not 2:50. Not 3. It's almost as if he's daring the concept of time itself to challenge him. You try not to scream into your itchy blanket. That's when you make the most questionable choice of your military career. You barge into Henri Leclerc's repair tent. The smell hits you first: burnt oil, old socks, something metallic and vaguely herbal. Leclerc's hunched over a table cluttered with gears, coils, and one suspiciously purring chicken. There's a wine bottle next to a disassembled watch. He's wearing goggles made from repurposed monocles and a soldier's soup ladle strapped to his head like a helmet. You whisper, "Henri, I need your madness." And Henri, eyes twitching with caffeine and genius, whispers back, "I was hoping you'd say that." This is how a field engineer, a half-broken timepiece, and 2 sleep-deprived lunatics start designing what may be the first alarm clock ever intended for war. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Clockmaking in France during the early 1800s was a respected and fast-evolving craft. In cities like Paris, mechanical clocks were becoming increasingly intricate, with automaton features, chimes, and artistic flourishes. But in a battlefield tent in Moravia, elegance is not your priority. You want volume. Leclerc digs through his pile of spare parts. He's got springs from carriage suspensions, bells from officers' call systems, even a tea kettle that whistles if you breathe wrong near it. The goal: rig a device that counts hours and ends with something loud enough to wake Napoleon and everyone within 10 meters. The first prototype is a disaster. It involves a rotating gear system tied to a tension spring and a hammer that hits a helmet when the wheel completes its rotation. It does make a loud noise. Unfortunately, it does so immediately. You both duck as the helmet goes flying, narrowly missing a map of Austria and a rather cranky ferret someone's been hiding in the rations. Leclerc takes notes. Needs delay. The second prototype actually works, sort of. You wind the spring, set the lever to drop after 5 rotations, and let it sit. For 15 minutes, nothing happens. Then, bang! The bell rings, the spring snaps, and a gust of sparks shoots across the tent like an angry fairy. It's progress. You spend the rest of the night tweaking angles, adjusting tension, and desperately trying not to wake the Emperor. Ironically, the man you're trying to serve by building a sleep saver is also the reason you haven't slept in 36 hours. Eventually, Leclerc attaches a candle to the contraption. As it burns, the wax weakens a thin string, which in turn releases a cog, turning a small gear and bing, activating the hammer strike. It's clunky. It's ugly. It's dangerously flammable. But it works. Historians still argue whether this field invention had any direct influence on later alarm clock designs, or if it was simply one of many desperate contraptions born out of necessity. What's clear, however, is that Napoleon's relentless structure fetish forced everyone around him to find increasingly creative ways to comply. You test it at 2:46 a.m. And at exactly 2:47, give or take a squeaky half-second, the bell dings, and you rush into Napoleon's tent with the night's weather report, troop status, and an impressive lack of singed eyebrows. He doesn't even look up from his map. Finally, he mutters, brushing lint from his coat. "You're on time." "Not a time." "The time." Of course, he doesn't ask how you managed it. He never asks. Napoleon doesn't need to know where the gears and springs come from, just that they obey. Still, there's something strange about the way he eyes your pocket where the device now rests, humming faintly like a beetle having a quiet tantrum. Later, as dawn breaks and Napoleon heads out to inspect cannons, Leclerc turns to you and says, "You know he's going to take credit for it, right?" You sigh. At least he might stop yelling. Spoiler, he does not stop yelling. But something has shifted. Over the next few days, word of the ticking contraption spreads through the camp. Officers want one. A general tries to trade you a Spanish coin and a half-eaten sausage for it. Leclerc starts charging outrageous fees for replicas. And just like that, Battlefield Timekeeping gets its first prototype upgrade. By the end of the week, 5 crude devices exist, each cobbled together from scavenged parts and varying levels of personal risk. One uses a slingshot trigger. Another involves a small, very nervous dog. But all of them are built to answer one command: wake up now, or face the Emperor. Quirky tidbit time. One of Leclerc's later models includes a tiny recorded whistle blown into a hollow pipe by a soldier trained to nap beside it and blow air at the exact moment. It works twice before the soldier falls asleep on the job and accidentally swallows the whistle. You and Henri keep refining the design. Less sparks. More reliability. Slightly less chance of decapitation. You don't realize it yet, but in this damp little corner of history, you've just helped seed the very concept of mechanical time enforcement. Napoleon still doesn't know. But he will. And when he does, oh boy, he'll run with it in a way only a megalomaniac with a ticking obsession and a freshly conquered continent possibly could. So, naturally, the first time someone tries to scale your Yankee, battlefield-bred contraption into something official, everything goes very, very wrong. It starts with a cannon. Because, of course, it does. You're standing in the outer ring of a makeshift war camp, watching Henri Leclerc explain his latest enhancement to a deeply skeptical artillery officer. The words alarm clock and blast radius should never appear in the same sentence, but here you are. The basic idea? Use the same trigger timing principle as your earlier candle and bell setup, only this time, apply it to long-distance bombardment. In theory, it's genius. If you can delay a cannon's firing until a precise moment, you could coordinate synchronized strikes across distant battlefronts without relying on runners or signal flags. But remember, this is 1805. Precise timing is a generous concept. Your tools are coils, fire, twine, and the constant looming threat of spontaneous combustion. The first demonstration ends exactly how you fear it will. Leclerc lights the fuse and points dramatically at the sky like some kind of deranged conductor. The fuse hisses, the spring clicks, and boom! The cannon goes off about 8 seconds too early, startling a horse into kicking over a soup cauldron and launching someone's dinner into a nearby officer's wig. The cannonball, it hits a tree, which falls onto a latrine. There is screaming. The horse looks smug. Napoleon is not pleased. But here's the surprising twist, he doesn't shut it down. Instead, he orders a full report. Because, despite the mishaps, Napoleon sees something more than a prank with gunpowder. He sees possibility, control, timing, an empire of movement so precise that war itself becomes predictable. Mainstream historical fact: Napoleon was a stickler for military logistics. He revolutionized how armies moved, using pre-planned timetables and supply chains long before modern generals had anything like walkie-talkies or drones. His campaigns were often decided by sheer speed. He would strike before the enemy even expected him to be near. So imagine what a weaponized concept of timing could offer him. Now toss in a side of accidental innovation. You overhear him later that night, muttering to Marshal Berthier, "A campaign is a clock. Every regiment a gear. Every command, a chime." You roll your eyes. But also, respect. Of course, now that your little invention has been noticed, it becomes less yours. Official orders arrive. You are to assist in the formal development of strategic timing mechanisms. Translation: you're being roped into a task force. You and Leclerc are joined by a handful of other savants and weirdos from the engineering corps, people with missing eyebrows and dangerous imaginations. One of them swears by the accuracy of pendulums on horseback. Another wants to rig pigeons with miniature hourglasses. You nod politely and move your bedroll away from his. Still, progress happens. The next prototype looks like a brass octopus. Winding gears, tension springs, and a miniature bell hidden inside a cannon trigger. It's not exactly safe, but it can delay a strike by a few minutes with relative consistency. Quirky fringe detail: one officer becomes so reliant on it, he names his alarm cannon Monique and kisses it goodnight. Monique later explodes during a thunderstorm. No one is injured, but the officer wears black for a week. Historians still argue whether these early timer cannons were truly used in coordinated combat or just field experiments with mixed success. No confirmed battles mention them by name, but sketches from military archives do suggest some kind of gear-based delay devices being tested. One account even describes a failed attempt to launch a time-triggered barrage during the siege of Danzig. The timing was off. The weather was worse. You begin to realize something else too. The more Napoleon obsesses over timing, the more everyone else does. You now have a set wake-up chime each morning, precise to the second. Lunches are staggered like train schedules. Even boots must be polished before the 6th bell after dawn. It's becoming a culture. A TikTok empire. And it's weirdly comforting. You start hearing the bells even when they don't ring. One night, just before lights out, Leclerc turns to you and whispers, "Do you think we broke something?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, people used to wake up with the sun. Now they wake up with us." You lie in silence, listening to the soft wind against canvas. Somewhere, a clock you built is winding down. Somewhere else, an officer is being jolted awake by a spring-loaded spoon hitting a cymbal. And in the heart of camp, Napoleon paces, already dreaming of new ways to make the world run on his time. That's when the joke takes root, one that will echo for decades. Napoleon didn't invent the alarm clock. He just bullied time into behaving. You know, things have escalated when the clocks start wearing uniforms. Not literally, of course. But metaphorically? Oh, absolutely. The little contraptions you once built from discarded belt buckles and soup kettle springs now show up polished, engraved, and this part makes you gag slightly, issued by the quartermaster. Yes, your battlefield-born Frankenclock has been standardized. Napoleon's not content with a handful of timing gadgets. No, he wants an entire battalion to tick like one synchronized heartbeat. So he commissions the very first regimental chronometry kits. They come in velvet-lined cases with the imperial eagle etched into the lid. Inside, you'll find an adjustable ringing module, 2 spare springs, a set of mini pliers, and instructions that read more like a religious text than a user manual. Because, naturally, they were written by Leclerc. You're sitting on a supply crate when one of the kits arrives. It smells like cedar and brass polish. You pick it up. It hums faintly in your hands. There's pride in the design, yes, but also something else. A warning. A curse. You shake off the melodrama until it starts ringing. Loudly. At exactly 3:14 a.m. And every officer in a 50-yard radius comes staggering out of their tents like panicked roosters. That's how you discover the kits were calibrated incorrectly. Someone, you'll never admit it was probably you, set the demo unit to military urgency mode, which includes random surprise alarms just to keep people ready. Napoleon hears about it, of course. He's not mad. He's delighted. Because now, his commanders are never fully at rest. They sleep light, ears twitching, waiting for the next chime. He calls it building mental agility. You call it emperor-induced insomnia. Mainstream historical fact time. Napoleon famously slept very little, an average of 3 to 4 hours a night, and believed that true leaders didn't require much rest. He'd often wake his marshals in the middle of the night for impromptu meetings, lectures, or, once, a 5-minute rant about the correct angle of cannon placement on sloped terrain. You were there. You still have dreams about that slope. What he doesn't know is that his beloved time discipline is about to backfire spectacularly. It starts with the younger officers. They begin competing. Who can rise earliest? Who can be dressed, shaved, and seated by their tent post at the precise toll of the morning bell? Soon there's a bragging system based entirely on punctuality. Major Fournier's boots touched gravel at 4:02 today, someone whispers, as if recounting a ghost sighting. Without even wrinkling his coat. Quirky tidbit. One officer starts wearing 6 watches on his arms to better sense the variance in regional timekeeping. He gets promoted. No one is surprised. The problem is, it turns weirdly toxic. You wake up one morning to find 2 junior lieutenants in a fistfight over whose alarm went off first. A duel is narrowly avoided. Another officer actually trains his dog to whimper at dawn so he can boast that he no longer needs mechanical assistance, he just feels time. You, meanwhile, are so tired that you dream about sleep. Inside the dream, you nap. And that nap has an alarm clock. Historians still argue whether this period marked the first protoculture of modern productivity obsession. Some believe Napoleon's regiments were a precursor to industrial time discipline, where human bodies were expected to match mechanical precision. Others say it was just a byproduct of an overachieving general with a control complex and access to too many clock springs. Either way, the ticking spreads. Soon, cities under Napoleonic occupation begin adopting more regimented timekeeping habits. Curfews are enforced not with sundials, but bells. Shopkeepers start opening on the hour. Even the clergy adjusts mass schedules to avoid overlap with military drills. Time itself is being colonized. And somewhere in the middle of it, you and Leclerc are just trying to keep the parts from exploding. One day, a courier brings a message sealed with the imperial crest. You assume it's more specifications. Maybe Napoleon wants musical chimes now. Or one that can also shave his sideburns while whistling La Marseillaise. Instead, it reads, "You are to present the timing device at the Palais des Tuileries. In person. Be punctual." Your heart flips. Paris. You've never been. You've never been more than 200 miles from wherever Napoleon is shouting at that moment. But now you're being summoned to the center of power, to showcase something you half invented by accident and mostly out of exhaustion. The journey is long, stiff, and rattly courier wagon, followed by a barge, then a rented carriage that smells like mold and regret. But Paris, when it unfolds before you, is a different world. Cobblestone streets buzz with boot heels and gossip. Gas lamps flicker like stars trying to break through the smoke. And the palace, oh, the palace. It looks like someone told an architect to build a cake, then forgot to stop him. Inside, the halls echo with hushed footsteps and layers of velvet too expensive to touch. You're ushered past sculptures, guards, and more clocks than you can count. None of them are synchronized. You wince. You wait in a drawing room with 2 clocks on opposite walls. They disagree by 3 minutes. You try not to panic. And then the doors swing open. Napoleon strides in, coat sharp, boots polished, and hair doing that signature sideways hurricane thing. He gestures to your device, now displayed on a velvet pillow like some sort of mechanical crown jewel. "Show me," he says. No hello. No handshake. Just time. You wind it. Set the spring. Light the candle. And wait. Tick. 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 He watches, unmoving, as if he could will it into obedience. Then, bing, a clear, sharp tone. The hammer strikes the bell. No sparks. No screams. Just time, obeying. He smiles. Finally, he says, "A weapon I don't need to reload." You're not sure what you expected after that demonstration. A medal, maybe. A quiet thank you. At the very least, some sleep. Instead, Napoleon decides you're now part of something called the Bureau de Mesure Impériale. Which sounds official, right? It's not. It's 4 people, yourself, Leclerc, an elderly horologist with a hearing problem, and a woman named Celeste who insists on building clock faces out of porcelain and crushed lapis lazuli. She drinks ink, occasionally. You love her immediately. Your mission? Simple, on paper, establish a standardized time discipline across all imperial holdings and subject territories. That's it. That's the whole brief. As in, you're supposed to make Europe tick the same way. No pressure. You glance at Leclerc. He's already pacing. "We'll need maps," he says. "Rail schedules. Factory bells. Lunar data." He's vibrating. He hasn't slept since Tuesday. Mainstream historical fact: though railroads don't yet exist in Napoleon's time, France is beginning to experiment with better roads, faster postal relays, and synchronized military communication across distances. Napoleon's campaigns depend on speed, so the need for time coordination is real. But without telegraphs or standard clocks, this is wildly ambitious. Your bureau starts small. Step 1. City clocks. You're sent to Dijon, where two bell towers are 10 minutes apart despite being visible from each other. The local clergy insists their time is based on the holy rhythm of the sun, while the mayor argues that his clock was blessed by a visiting bishop and thus holds temporal authority. You settle the debate with a new invention, the portable harmonizer. Okay, it's just a box with two bells, a mirror, and a candle-timed pendulum. But it lets you compare chimes side by side and nudge gears until they match. Townsfolk gather to watch. One child claps. You feel like a wizard. Within a month, 6 cities sync their towers. It's working. Sort of. Quirky fringe tidbit: in Lyon, a clockmaker becomes obsessed with matching the harmonizer down to the millisecond. He stops eating. He stops sleeping. Eventually, he collapses, clutching a diagram of gear ratios. When revived, his first words are, "I saw eternity. It was loud." Then come the border towns. This is harder. Each region clings to its own true noon. Some follow solar position, others go by bells, and one town claims the local rooster is the only trustworthy authority. They name him Cluckerlange. He is not consistent. You and Celeste invent a new method, sun-shadow drift charts. Basically, giant notepads that calculate expected shadow angles at given hours based on position. It's rudimentary, but towns begin to cooperate. Why? Because you bring uniforms. And uniforms mean bureaucracy. And bureaucracy, in France, is as good as divine decree. Historians still argue whether this bureau ever truly functioned or was more symbolic, a way to impose order without physical force. The truth is somewhere in between. Your harmonizers and drift charts are clunky, breakable, and often ignored. But the idea that time can be unified spreads. And Napoleon? He loves it. Every week, he demands updates. How punctual is Marseille? Has Berlin submitted its hourly reports? Why does Zurich still ring at 11:58? You invent reasons. Sometimes you just blame fog. But then, the impossible happens. A region, Alsace, synchronizes entirely. Every bell tower, every municipal schedule, every factory whistle, they all align. You walk through the village and hear it. The deep, warm clang of unity. Even the cows seem calmer. You send word to Paris. You expect applause. Instead, you get a new assignment. Spain. You groan. Because Spain, as anyone who's ever tried to time anything there knows, runs on vibes. The sun is brighter, the wine is stronger, and clocks are suggestions. You arrive in a town where the official city bell rings 4 times a day and never once at the correct hour. Celeste tries, bless her. She hand paints porcelain clock faces and gifts them to local priests. They become bird baths. Leclerc gives lectures. He gets tomatoes thrown at him. You try reasoning with the mayor. He's asleep. At 2 p.m. That's when it hits you. Napoleon doesn't really want everyone to be on time. He wants everyone to be on his time. This whole thing isn't about order. It's about control. And so, you pivot. You stop trying to convince towns. You start building imperial clocks. Taller. Louder. Unignorable. You place them in plazas. Paint them red and gold. Stamp the eagle on every corner. They don't match the sun, or the rooster, or local bells. They match Paris. And slowly, grudgingly, people begin to look up at them instead of the sky. Quirky fringe moment. One town swears their new imperial clock is haunted. It ticks loudly, but the hands never move. When you investigate, you discover it's wired to a spinning chicken inside the base. No one can explain it. You leave it alone. You name it Clockatrice. Even back in Paris, the bureau gains fame. People start sending you letters, requests, designs. You receive blueprints for self-winding clocks powered by soup heat, gravity-powered coffee alarms, and one disturbing sketch labeled Napoleonic cuckoo pecks you awake. You don't open that one. But it's working. Time is no longer local. It's imperial. And you helped make that happen. You sit in your workshop late one night, surrounded by gear bits and wax shavings. Outside, the city bells chime. All together. You close your eyes. For the first time in months, you sleep through it. You wake up to applause, which is confusing, because you're still in bed. Then you realize it's the clock. The one in the corner of your bureau's Paris office, the one Leclerc insisted needed a theatrical upgrade. At precisely 7 o'clock, it now applauds. Mechanically, with little wooden hands that slap together like a drunk marionette trying to praise your punctuality. You groan. It's going to be one of those days. Celeste is already in the main chamber when you shuffle in, still half dreaming of silence. She's polishing a new design, a wall-mounted sundial that also plays lullabies. For the children, she says brightly, or very anxious adults. Leclerc arrives moments later, tripping over a spring-loaded calendar someone left in the hallway. You don't even blink anymore. This is just how it is at the Bureau de Mesure Imperial, part laboratory, part madhouse. But today brings new orders. You're summoned to a planning session with the Ministry of Public Instruction. Because Napoleon wants more than just bells and synchronization now. He wants education. Mainstream historical fact, Napoleon implemented sweeping educational reforms, creating lycées and centralizing curriculum. One of his lesser-known mandates: time discipline in classrooms. Students were to be trained to obey the rhythm of bells, not just to learn facts but to embody punctual citizenship. You're asked to design a system by which children may be taught the majesty of imperial time. Right. Because nothing says majestic like making 10-year-olds wake up at dawn and salute a ticking box. Still, you try. You invent a schoolroom time regulator, small, portable, and very loud. You nickname it the Petit Bête, the little beast. It comes with 5 bells of escalating tone: polite, assertive, shrill, shrieking, and run, the principal is coming. They're a hit. Or, depending on who you ask, a minor psychological trauma generator. Quirky fringe tidbit: one Parisian school mistress swears her students have begun twitching every time a spoon hits a teacup. She blames the Petit Bête. Her class now flinches in unison, like a well-timed flock of startled pigeons. You report all of this to Napoleon, expecting, perhaps, a reconsideration. Nope. He's thrilled. The children must learn to conquer time, he says, pacing before a floor-length mirror in a room filled with ticking, chiming devices. As I have. You look around. Every clock shows a slightly different time. You say nothing. Historians still argue whether this push for time discipline in schools was about preparing children for civic life or conditioning future soldiers and bureaucrats. Either way, by 1810, A good portion of France's youth can tell you the hour more reliably than the sun. Back at the bureau, you notice something else. People start visiting. Not diplomats. Not scholars. Clockmakers. Dozens of them. From Marseilles. From Prussia. From rural Swiss valleys. They trickle in, clutching hand-drawn schematics, strange blueprints, and stories of devices that never quite worked, but might now, with your help. It's touching. Until you realize they all want to be part of your empire-wide network. They want to link their devices to your clocks. You are, apparently, the time char now. So you start a registry. The Chronothek. A living library of every known timekeeping device in the empire. Celeste oversees cataloging. Leclerc handles testing, and inevitably breaking, half the items. You wander the rows, stunned at what people have built. Pendulums the length of dining tables, water clocks powered by indoor fountains, one bizarre entry labeled the philosopher's elbow that measures time via the decay rate of a moldy ham. You disqualify that one. Mostly out of fear. Your registry becomes semi-famous. Tourists come. Children gape. One elderly woman faints in front of a synchronized triptych of hourglasses and later claims to have seen her past lives flicker through the sand. Napoleon, again, is thrilled. He orders a copy built in Milan. And one in Naples. And one, he insists, on a boat. Cue the floating time museum. You and Celeste board the bateau chronometer with the mild panic of two people who know boats and clocks mix about as well as fire and tax audits. The vessel lurches down the Seine with a symphony of chimes, gongs, and an unfortunate bell tuned accidentally to the key of Sobbing Goose. Still, it's magnificent. Each deck features a different timekeeping philosophy: solar, lunar, mechanical, water, sand. You add a Dreamtime section just for fun, clocks designed to run backward, skip hours, or chime only when someone yawns. It becomes the most popular floor. Quirky tidbit: a little boy steals a tiny sundial and uses it to predict snack time. He's terrifyingly accurate. You promote him on the spot. One evening, docked near Bordeaux, you host a demonstration. The entire town comes aboard. You walk them through each section, timing each speech to a bell, a drip, a flame. The applause is real this time. And so is the feeling in your chest. Maybe this whole absurd, ticking empire actually means something. Then, disaster. Well, near disaster. An officer rushes aboard, breathless. Emperor sighting, he says. He's coming. Tonight. You freeze. Napoleon? Here. On this boat. You race to check the clocks. Some are slow. Others are ticking in Morse code, thanks to Leclerc's latest update. One is gently weeping. You yell. Celeste throws a parasol. Leclerc resets his mustache. It's chaos. But then Napoleon arrives. And, he's smiling. He steps aboard like he owns time itself and, to be fair, he sort of does, and begins his tour. He doesn't say much. Just nods. Occasionally hums. Stops once to ask, why does this one meow? It purrs when the hour is correct, Celeste replies. He nods again. Then, at the top deck, beneath the stars and the soft ticking of 24 harmonized bells, he turns to you. You have built me a nation of hours, he says. You're too tired to say anything profound back. You just bow. He leaves. And that night, for the first time ever, the boat's clocks all chime in harmony. It is, truly, the loudest thing you've ever heard. But also, beautiful. You're promoted. It comes in the form of a letter, sealed with imperial wax and soaked in a cologne that smells suspiciously like victory and lemon rind. By decree of the emperor, it begins. You are now Inspector General du Temps. General Inspector of Time. You chuckle. Then you realize it's not a joke. You've gone from accidental inventor to the empire's foremost authority on clocks. Which sounds prestigious until you realize the job includes fieldwork. A lot of fieldwork. Your first task as inspector: investigate temporal unrest in the northern provinces. Yes, that's the actual phrase. Apparently, several towns in the Low Countries have been rejecting imperial time. Instead, they've resurrected folk clocks' ancient, hyperlocal time systems based on tides, crop cycles, and the howling of a particular dog named Jacques. You travel north with a suitcase full of bells, scrolls, and a dangerously experimental wind-up rooster. Leclerc refuses to come. Celeste hands you a pouch of lavender and tells you not to let the clocks bully you. The first town you visit is called Veerhaven. Their central clock has no hands. Instead, it emits smells. Cinnamon means morning. Dill means lunch. Smoke means curfew. You're offered a tour by a woman named Gerda who insists her nose has never misled her in 42 years. You don't have the heart to argue. Mainstream historical fact: in several pre-modern communities, especially in agrarian regions, time was perceived in non-mechanical ways: smells, sounds, temperature, even the behavior of animals. Clock time was an elite invention that often clashed with rural temporal traditions. Your job is to convince these places to join the imperial schedule. It doesn't go well. In one village, the mayor refuses to speak unless the sun is exactly overhead. You wait 3 hours. When he finally emerges, he just shrugs and says, "No." Another town rings their bell 13 times at midnight, just to be different. You attempt diplomacy. You host a time carnival, yes, that's what you call it. You set up booths, guess the minute, balance the pendulum, name that chime. Children love it. Adults, less so. One man screams when a cuckoo pops out. He says it's a harbinger of betrayal. You send him home with a pamphlet and a cookie. Quirky fringe tidbit: in one bizarre episode, you encounter a group who swear their crops grow better when the town clock runs backwards during equinoxes. They call it reverse farming. The cabbages are huge. You write it down, just in case. And yet, amidst the chaos, something happens. They begin to talk to each other. Towns start comparing systems, sharing ideas. You organize a temporal symposium, a fancy term for gathering mayors in a barn with tea and ticking devices. They bicker, sure, but by sunset, several agree to trial imperial time. Not because you force them, because they're curious. You leave the north bruised, wind-chapped, but optimistic. Back in Paris, Leclerc greets you with a map covered in red wax dots. Time leaks, he says gravely. Places where the hours slip. You stare at him. He's serious. Apparently, his new network of listening posts, little kiosks that record bell chimes across France, has picked up anomalies. Some towns are reporting phantom hours. Minutes that don't belong. Maybe someone's inventing time, Celeste says over tea, almost gleeful. You run simulations. You check moon cycles. You even reread Descartes, which is its own form of punishment. And you find something odd. Most of the phantom hours appear along the same path, an old Roman road running east to west, connecting Lyon to the Atlantic. Historians still argue whether these anomalies were real or the result of mechanical failure, superstition, or wartime stress. But in the Bureau, they become legend. You call it the hour path. You decide to follow it. Packing lightly, just your harmonizer, a sundial, and a generous amount of biscuits, you set off. Each town along the hour path has a story. One claims their rooster now crows at 4 in the morning instead of 5. Another says their shadows are arriving too early. A third just points at the sky and says, the stars have gone impatient. You're skeptical until you reach a village with no clocks. None. They smashed them all last week. The mayor explains, every bell had begun ringing at once, non-stop, for a full day and night. The people couldn't sleep. The cows refused to milk. One man claims he heard the future whispering between ticks. You nod slowly, trying not to alarm anyone. Quirky moment. A child hands you a handmade clock that runs sideways. It tells you when, she whispers, but not what. You smile. You take it. And suddenly, your mission shifts again. It's not just about synchronization anymore. It's about mystery. You begin collecting these oddities. Broken timepieces that behave unpredictably. A water clock that freezes despite warm weather. An hourglass that refills itself at dawn. You label them anomalous. Celeste builds a shelf. Leclerc insists on wearing gloves around them. You place the sideways clock at the center. And one night, it ticks. Loudly. Just once. And you swear you hear your name. The sideways clock speaks again. Well, not literally. It doesn't grow lips and recite Shakespeare. But one morning, it ticks twice, when it's not supposed to tick at all. You're in the bureau kitchen stirring honey into weak coffee, and you hear it, clear as day. Tick. Tick. Then nothing. No one else hears it, of course. Leclerc is busy debating with a sparrow that's somehow gotten into the chimney again, and Celeste has locked herself in the harmonics lab to teach the clocks to whisper compliments. So you go to the shelf. The sideways clock is glowing. Faintly. A warm pulse around the rim, like a heartbeat trapped in brass. You don't touch it. You just nod, slowly, and write in your log. Subject 8b. Possible consciousness event. Investigate. You don't tell Napoleon. Instead, you throw yourself into research. You visit old monasteries, crawl through dusty libraries, interview half-mad monks who once timed their prayers with dripping wax and say things like, time isn't ticking, it's listening. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval timekeeping wasn't about seconds or minutes, it was about moments. Monks measured time by prayer cycles, candle lengths, and natural cues. The idea of time as fixed, numerical, and universal didn't solidify until the Enlightenment. And now, under Napoleon, you're part of the team forcing that universality into existence. But in the background, a strange question grows louder. What if time doesn't want to be tamed? You write to Celeste's old mentor, a reclusive horologist named Anthelm, who once claimed he built a temporal amplifier before the revolution and buried it in the Alps. You think it's nonsense. Until he writes back. His letter is one sentence. Come north. Bring gloves. You leave Paris with Celeste, 3 sandwiches, and a bad feeling. Anthelm lives in a tiny village halfway up a mountain. The journey takes days, your boots grow mold, and a goat eats part of your map. But when you arrive, he's waiting ancient, slightly translucent, and holding what looks like a golden mushroom. Time, he says, pointing to it, is not straight. You nod politely. Celeste is already sketching the device. It hums faintly when touched, and smells like cinnamon and rust. Anthelm leads you to a small cave behind his home. Inside, dozens of clocks. All ticking out of sync. All pointing to different times. None seem to care. They are dreaming, he says. Let them. He shows you the amplifier. It's a chair, surrounded by mirrors. Above it, a pendulum dangles, suspended not from a string, but from a beam of light. You sit in it, of course. Because you're curious. Because why not? Because what else is the inspector of time supposed to do? The moment your back touches the chair, everything shifts. You're no longer in the cave. You're standing in Paris, but not your Paris. The sky is a deep orange. The buildings hum with unseen engines. The Eiffel Tower is nowhere in sight, but instead there's a vast spire made entirely of ticking gears, reaching into the clouds. You hear footsteps. Then your voice, calling out a time. Midnight -3. Then you blink and you're back. Anthelm offers you tea like nothing happened. You don't drink it. Is this a vision? You ask. No, he says, deadpan. That's Thursday. Quirky fringe tidbit. Anthelm claims to have been stuck in August 14th for 12 years until a pigeon landed on his amplifier and reversed the polarity. You assume this is metaphorical. You hope this is metaphorical. You bring the amplifier back to the bureau. Leclerc insists it goes in the unexplained hallway. Celeste hooks it to the harmonics grid. The sideways clock begins ticking erratically in its presence. You're worried, but also exhilarated. Historians still argue whether Napoleon's scientific bureaus were hotbeds of genius or reckless experimental theaters. They certainly produced wonders, but often at the cost of safety, ethics, and stability. You now understand why. Napoleon hears about the amplifier through channels you didn't know existed. He summons you at dusk. You're ushered into his personal quarters, where the walls are now covered in clocks, some of which are upside down, several of which are ticking backwards, and one of which appears to be eating its own pendulum. He's in a good mood. Do you believe, he asks, that I can outlast death? You blink. I think you already have, sire. He laughs. Then gestures to a chair. You're there for hours. He speaks of empire, memory, destiny, of how time must serve greatness, not the other way around. He wants the amplifier tested. Fully. On people. Not just for minutes. 4 days. You hesitate. He doesn't like hesitation. I gave you time, he says, and you will give me eternity. You leave the palace shaken. Celeste corners you the next day. I've been listening to the amplifier, she says, and it's saying names. You both sit with it. You write what you hear. Lucien. Amalric. Napoleon. You. She looks at you. You don't blink. The sideways clock ticks once. Louder. This time, you feel it in your bones. You start dreaming in clocks. Not metaphorical ones, literal. Massive gears grinding the sky. Bell towers growing from the ocean. A cuckoo bird the size of a horse pecking at your window and whispering your name in 12 different accents. You wake in cold sweats. Or you wake laughing. Sometimes both. Celeste isn't sleeping either. She's developed a habit of speaking in meter, muttering things like quarter past truth, half before reason. Leclerc catches her writing equations on toast. You're all unraveling. Because the amplifier works. It shouldn't. It can't. But it does. Mainstream historical fact. Though the scientific tools of Napoleon's time couldn't manipulate time itself, they flirted with radical concepts. Breguet's precision clocks, early chronographs, and synchronized systems laid the groundwork for a kind of temporal consciousness, one based in control. You're past control now. The first test subject is you. Because, again, of course it is. Celeste sets the mirrors. Leclerc murmurs protective Latin. You sit in the chair, eyes open, fingers gripping the armrests like they might fly off without you. The beam of light swings once. Then, you're 7. In your mother's garden, winding a pocket watch she always said belonged to your great-grandfather. Only now it's ticking backwards, and the flowers around you bloom in reverse. A bee stings your arm. Then, you're on a battlefield. Not your war. Not even your century. The flags are wrong. So are the uniforms. But the smell, smoke and sweat and mud is right. A cannonball freezes mid-air and starts to slowly melt like butter in the sun. You blink. Then you're nowhere. Just ticking. Soft. All around you. You return. The amplifier sparks. Celeste is pale. Leclerc is crying for reasons he can't explain. You have a nosebleed shaped like a question mark. You're back. But not really. Because you brought something with you. It's hard to explain. A sense. A rhythm. A layer of time beneath time. You hear it constantly now. A low pulse. Like the world is a clock, and you're inside the walls. Quirky fringe tidbit. One of your notes from the amplifier session reads simply, "Time has bones." You don't remember writing it. Neither does Celeste. Leclerc blames the hallway. Word of your experiments leaks. Of course it does. Napoleon is thrilled. The military is less so. One general sends a stern letter saying, "If you can't weaponize it, we don't need it." Another requests a clock that can pause cowardice. You ignore them. Because things are getting stranger. The clocks in the bureau start aligning themselves. On their own. Unplugged, uncalibrated, some even broken, yet they all tick together now. Exactly. You start calling it the synchrony. Leclerc insists it's a sign of the apocalypse. Celeste thinks it's a resonance field. Like tuning forks, she says. Only spooky. You try to measure it. You chart the ticks. They form a pattern. Then a shape. Then a name. Your name. Historians still argue whether the so-called synchrony was a mass delusion, a carefully staged hoax, or the result of early magnetic field experiments gone sideways. But in your office, it's very real and getting louder. Napoleon visits the bureau unannounced. He stares at the amplifier. He doesn't speak for 10 minutes. Then he whispers, "What's beyond the last hour?" You don't answer. Because you've started to wonder the same thing. And then, the sideways clock disappears. Not stolen. Not moved. Just gone. There one moment. Blank shelf the next. You tear the bureau apart. Nothing. Celeste finds a note where the clock was. 3 words. It's not time. You sit in silence for a long while. Then Leclerc comes in, hat askew, holding an ancient book with a title in Latin that translates roughly to the clock that eats days. You laugh. Then you don't. Because inside the book is a sketch. Of your sideways clock. Identical. Right down to the strange scratch across its face, one you thought was from a drop years ago. But this drawing predates you. Predates Napoleon. Predates France. You check the date. 1346. You whisper to yourself, "What is happening?" Then, as if in answer, the clocks in the bureau stop. All of them. Same second. Same tick. Silence. Even Leclerc stops breathing for a moment. Then, from nowhere, the cuckoo clock above your door pops open. It doesn't cuckoo. It screams. You fall to your knees. Everything inside you says, something is wrong with the fabric. Not just of time, but of history. of sequence, of memory. Celeste says the amplifier might be creating echoes, loops, holes. Maybe the sideways clock wasn't just a receiver, she whispers. Maybe it was a lock. And you're the key. You spend the night under your desk. Not because you're afraid, although you are, but because your office has the thickest walls and no windows. It's the only place in the bureau that still feels anchored. The rest of the building groans, as though the floorboards are arguing about which century they belong to. You clutch a thermos of cold tea and listen. Not to the wind, to time. Because you can hear it now. A high whine under the silence. A slow, creeping tick that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere. A second heartbeat. Yours, but not. Leclerc finds you in the morning, holding a compass. You're not going anywhere, he says gently, but I get it. You decide it's time to act. The sideways clock is gone, yes, but its pulse still lingers. You can feel it. So you trace it. Like a bloodhound, if bloodhounds also questioned the philosophical structure of linearity. Mainstream historical fact: by the early 19th century, France had begun installing official timeposts across the country, metal steles with calibrated clocks meant to enforce standardization. Several were defaced within weeks. People didn't like being told when to live. You ride west. The map you carry isn't paper, it's smell and rhythm and phantom tick. Every so often you close your eyes and wait for the pulse. Stronger. Stronger still. You reach a town called Maulevrier. No clocks. Not a single one. In fact, the townspeople seem off. Their movements are slow, but fluid, like dancers rehearsing a routine just a half-second behind the music. They speak in temporal riddles. It's always before breakfast, one man insists. I haven't had a Monday in years, a woman sighs. You're invited to a house where time is kept in jars. Shelves of them. Labeled, nap, rain, argument, hope. Each jar, when opened, releases a sound, a smell, a moment. You crack one marked 2:43 p.m. and smell strawberries and hear a faint sigh. Celeste would love this, you think. Then you remember she's back at the bureau, trying to stabilize the harmonics grid, muttering phrases like temporal viscosity and echo density. Quirky fringe tidbit: a local priest shows you a parchment that appears blank until held at sunset, when it reveals a clock face that only ticks on full moons. He claims it was a gift from a wandering horologer who traveled backward. That night, you dream again. This time, you're not alone. The sideways clock is there, floating, unwound. Its hands are gone, but you know what time it says. Yours. Not a specific hour. Not a date. You wake with a start. There's a bell in the distance. One single chime. Not from a tower. From beneath. You follow it to a forest just outside town. The trees lean slightly to the east, as if blown by time itself. At the center, a clearing. And there, embedded in the earth, is a clock. Your clock. Sideways. Buried halfway, like a seed. You fall to your knees. Touch it. The pulse stops. Then starts again. Faster. The world bends. You see Napoleon standing in front of a mirror that reflects nothing. You see Celeste, floating in a room made entirely of hourglasses. You see Leclerc aged 1,000 years, sipping wine with a skeleton in a powdered wig. And then you see yourself. Older. Eyes like worn brass. Whispering, close the hour. You jolt back. Your hand is burned. The clock is gone again. The clearing is empty. You check your pocket watch, it now ticks backwards. You don't care. You return to Paris. Everything has changed. The bureau is pulsing, walls breathing like lungs, rooms reshuffling themselves. Celeste greets you at what used to be the library but is now the conservatory, filled with singing sundials. It's leaking, she says. Time. Time is leaking. Not spilling. Not exploding. Leaking. Like a wound that won't close. Historians still argue whether Napoleon's temporal experiments reached this level of instability, but many agree that mysterious disruptions in mechanical clocks during this era were too frequent to dismiss as mere fault. You find Leclerc in the basement. He's built a tower. Indoors. A replica of a bell tower, 20 feet tall, made of wood, copper, and refusal. It's a dampener, he says. It will hold the bleed. You stare. Then nod. Because why not? At this point, time itself has lost most of its manners. Breakfast comes after sunset. People walk into conversations they haven't had yet. One in turn reports that his future self told him to take the day off, so he did. Napoleon is nowhere, but he calls. A small phonograph machine spits out his voice. I saw the hour. It blinked. You don't respond. Because you've seen it too. You and Celeste agree, the amplifier must be used again. But this time, on the sideways clock itself. If you can find it. And if it will let you. You wait until midnight. Because of course you do. That's when the bureau is quietest, when the walls seem least opinionated, and when the clocks, not the ones you built, but the ones you didn't, start to hum in chorus. It's not a song, exactly. More like a warning. You strap yourself into the amplifier chair. Celeste tightens the bindings. They're not necessary, physically. But emotionally, you want to feel like something is still holding you here. Leclerc adjusts the pendulum. It no longer swings on a beam of light. Now it arcs through possibility. It leaves a faint trail behind it, like a comet if comets smelled like ozone and fresh ink. You nod. The amplifier activates. No flash. No sound. Just a blink. And you're somewhere else. Mainstream historical fact. The Paris meridian was once proposed as the prime meridian of the world, long before Greenwich claimed the honor. Napoleon wanted to make France not just the center of power, but the center of time itself. You're standing on it now. But the city around you is gone. Not ruined, erased. Soft outlines remain, like chalk drawings in rain. You walk slowly, boots pressing into cobblestone that wobbles like jelly. Time has liquefied here. And at the center, the sideways clock. It's massive now. 10 feet across. Hovering. Its hands turn like lazy dancers. You approach. No fear this time. Only familiarity. Like returning to a childhood home that's burned down but still feels like yours. You raise your hand. And the clock speaks. Not in words. In memory. You're flooded with them. Not just yours. Not even mostly yours. Echoes of people across centuries. A girl counting her father's footsteps during the revolution. A monk in 800 AD forgetting the prayer order and improvising with a sunbeam. An old man in the future, blinking at a hologram that shows you. Your knees give out. The sideways clock lowers to your level. You place your palm against its face. It's warm. It whispers, last chance. And you understand. It's offering a reset. Or a choice. Or an escape. But only if you know what to ask. Quirky fringe tidbit. You remember an old theory one Celeste mocked at the time about sympathetic horology, the idea that clocks in emotional proximity to their makers develop shared rhythms. The sideways clock isn't just a device. It's connected to you. It's becoming you. You whisper a question, "What am I?" The clock ticks once and shows you. A child stealing time from his grandfather's workshop. A soldier refusing orders because the sun felt wrong. A scientist who accidentally bent history in half while looking for his cat. You are all of them. And also, none. Historians still argue whether Napoleon funded Project Eon, a rumored secret experiment in temporal immersion. No official documents survive, but scattered journals refer to a time mirror and a self-looped man. You suspect those were you. The clock begins to spin. Faster. Louder. Your vision shatters. And then, you're back. In the bureau. You gasp. Celeste is shouting. Leclerc is holding a sundial like a shield. Time is unraveling. You can feel it. The floor beneath your feet slides like melted butter. The windows show different centuries in each pane. You see a dinosaur blink. A zeppelin explode. A girl writing a letter in Morse code to someone named Tomorrow. And still, at the center of it all, is you. You are the frequency. You are the wound. You are the lock. And the key. You race to the harmonics room. Celeste follows. Leclerc chants something in Latin that may or may not be made up. You pull the amplifier core from the chair and plug it into the grid. The entire building shakes. Somewhere, a bell tolls 12. And then, the sideways clock appears. Mid-air. Turning. Waiting. You step forward. Close it, you whisper. And the clock answers. Not with sound. With stillness. Everything stops. The papers mid-fall freeze. The light through the window crystallizes. Even breath forgets how to move. And in that pause, you choose. Not to go back. Not to go forward. But to anchor. You let the clock sink to you. Let it map itself to your heartbeat. Let it become still. Slowly, gently, the world resumes. Like a yawn. Like a tide retreating. Like a sigh after a storm. You collapse. Celeste catches you. Leclerc weeps. But this time it's relief. The bureau is quiet. For the first time in weeks, everything ticks normally. You look at the amplifier. Dead. Used up. The sideways clock. Still there. But no longer floating. Just sitting. Heavy. And, somehow, grateful. You wake up in the infirmary. A real bed. Cotton sheets. Actual pillow. No clocks in the room, just a vase of violets and a lukewarm cup of something once resembling coffee. Celeste is slumped in a chair beside you, arms folded, mouth slightly open. Leclerc is sitting cross-legged on the floor, sketching a blueprint for a time-proof spoon. You're alive. Somehow. You sit up slowly, head full of fog and stardust. The sideways clock, it worked. You think. You hope. You feel lighter, as though the chronal static in your veins has been grounded. But the bureau is different now. Calm, yes, but also quiet. Like an orchestra after the final note, when the instruments rest and the audience doesn't dare breathe. You find yourself back in your office. Same desk. Same smudge on the corner of the window from the storm 3 weeks ago. But on your bookshelf, something new, the sideways clock. Just sitting there. Small again. Plain. Inert. You touch it. Nothing happens. It ticks. Once. Then stops. Mainstream historical fact. Napoleon's obsession with control extended to standardizing time across all French territories. He even contemplated adjusting time zones to better reflect imperial ambitions. Some letters suggest he dreamed of an empire so synchronized, it would run like a single watch. Now you know why. You call a meeting. Celeste, Leclerc, and a handful of others from the Bureau's inner circle crowd around the central chamber. You place the sideways clock in the middle of the table. We ended something, you say. Or maybe started something else. Leclerc proposes immediate destruction. Burn it. Grind it. Launch it into a volcano. I hear Vesuvius is accepting donations. Celeste shakes her head. No. It's part of us now. And anyway, what if we need it again? You agree, reluctantly. Because you do feel it. Like a scar. Or an old injury that aches before the rain. Quirky fringe tidbit. In the drawer beneath the amplifier console, you find a gear. Not mechanical, biological. Smooth, bone-colored, with little divots shaped like time signatures. You label it not hours and lock it in a lead box. Things start returning to normal. Or at least your version of it. People sleep. Clocks tick forward. The Bureau stops moaning in ancient dialects. You receive a letter from Napoleon. I've dreamed of a world where clocks need not be wound. Perhaps you've shown me why they must. It's written in backwards cursive. You need a mirror to read it. Historians still argue whether Napoleon's later years were marked by madness, enlightenment, or a strange cocktail of both. His journals mention the boy who sealed the second hand, which most biographers assume is metaphor. You know better. The amplifier remains sealed. You've dismantled the core. Hid the pieces in 5 different locations. Celeste has burned the schematics, though she kept a copy in her head. Leclerc swore an oath in some ancient tongue that sounds like gargling pebbles. But you keep the sideways clock. In plain sight. Because what's more suspicious than hiding it? People begin to forget. The time bleed vanishes. Paris returns to its usual nonsense. Pigeons, perfume, and protests. The Bureau fades into the fog of bureaucracy. You keep working. On normal things. A watch that never needs winding. A pendulum that tracks sleep cycles. You even design an alarm that sounds like applause, which Leclerc insists is the worst invention in history. One day, you notice something odd. The sideways clock is ticking again. Very slowly. 1 tick per week. You try not to panic. Instead, you document it. Celeste joins you. Together, you chart each tick. Patterns emerge, faint, like whispers on fogged glass. Dates. Names. Symbols. Some you recognize. Most you don't. But one stands out. A name. Yours. Written upside down. You don't tell anyone. Because what could you say? I think a clock is planning to remember me. Instead, you begin recording your dreams. They've returned. The usual suspects, floating towers, weeping hours, a door labeled tomorrow that refuses to open. But now, something new, a staircase made of calendars, and at the top, Napoleon. Wearing pajamas. Drinking a cup of time. You tell yourself it's just your brain processing trauma. Leclerc insists it's indigestion. But the dreams feel real. One evening, you find Celeste in the courtyard, carving equations into the dirt. She looks up, eyes tired. It's still active, she says. What is? The connection. Between you and it. You nod. Because you know. You feel it. Not like before. No chaos. No distortion. But a hum. Low. Gentle. Like the sideways clock is breathing. Waiting. You touch it. And it ticks. Just once. But this time, it feels like a question. You try ignoring it. For exactly 6 days. That's how long it takes before the sideways clock ticks again, this time in your coat pocket, where you absolutely did not put it. Which is disconcerting on several levels, including the part where you don't remember wearing a coat that day. You set it down. Again. 2 hours later, it reappears in your lunchbox. Next to a sandwich you also didn't make. This is fine, you tell yourself. This is a normal response to living through a temporal compression event engineered by a French emperor with control issues and questionable sleep habits. Celeste is less amused. She sets up a containment field using crushed tourmaline, antique ink, and something she claims is psychic chalk. Leclerc adds a drawing of a chicken for protection. He says it's tradition. You don't ask questions anymore. Mainstream historical fact. In the final years of his exile on St. Helena, Napoleon became obsessed with timepieces, breaking them open, examining gears, recording the precise moment of every storm, breath, and visitor. His physician once wrote that the emperor fears the hour more than the sword. You're beginning to understand why. Because the sideways clock isn't just ticking now. It's sinking. Not to you, to the world. Every tick aligns with a moment outside. A cough in the hall. A bell in the church. The exact instant a pigeon decides to poop on your windowsill. You test it. Set up a row of matches. Light the first one. The second ignites exactly as the clock ticks. So does the third. Celeste calls it microsynchronicity. Leclerc calls it bad juju. You call it what it is. A countdown. You try to decipher it. Each tick seems paired with something specific. A memory. A decision. A fragment of a conversation you forgot you ever had. It's mapping you. Or maybe measuring you. One night, after too much wine and not enough logic, you sit alone with it and whisper. What happens when it stops ticking? The clock doesn't answer. But your reflection blinks. You don't. You check again. Yep. Your reflection blinked first. Quirky fringe tidbit. In 1893, the French government officially adopted universal time for railway schedules, replacing the traditional solar time kept by towns. One town refused. For 14 years, Cluses operated on true local time, maintained by a grandfather clock nobody ever touched. It was always correct. You begin dreaming without sleeping. You're awake, at your desk, drinking lukewarm tea when you see it. Napoleon, again. Sitting at your desk this time. Writing. In a journal made of ticking parchment. He looks up. You still don't understand, he says, but you will. Then he fades. You blink. You're still at your desk. But your tea is warm again. And there's a note in your hand. You didn't write it. It reads, 13 left. You assume it's not donuts. You track the ticks. 13 more, the note said. So you start labeling them. Tick 1, a sparrow lands on your windowsill. Tick 2, Celeste mutters again, in her sleep. Tick 3, the power flickers in only your office. Tick 4, the smell of gunpowder. Brief, gone. Tick 5, a pocket watch you haven't seen in years falls out of your coat. Tick 6, a hallway clock rings 13 times. No one hears it but you. Tick 7, you laugh. Genuinely. For the first time in weeks. And then, it pauses. No tick for 48 hours. You begin to unravel. The stillness is louder than the ticking ever was. You check the sideways clock constantly. You sleep with it beside you. You even sing to it, quietly, under your breath, lullabies your grandmother used to hum. On the third night, it ticks again. Tick 8. And suddenly, the air feels different. Not heavy. Not electric. Ready. Historians still argue whether time anomalies around the Bureau were caused by rogue experiments or an ambient chronal residue left from the amplifier. Some argue time itself adapted to the Bureau's presence, like a limb learning to twitch on command. You know the truth. Time didn't adapt. It noticed. And now, it's paying attention. You visit Celeste. She's built a prototype, a chrono anchor. A wearable device that grounds your perception of time. Like gravity boots for your memory. You put it on. It hums. Faintly. Leclerc brings you a sandwich. It's shaped like an hourglass. You're too tired to laugh. Tick 9 comes during a conversation. You're mid-sentence when the sideways clock ticks and the world shifts. Not visibly, but emotionally. Like something just decided your next choice matters. You stare at Celeste. She stares back. I felt that, she says. Tick 10 happens in the silence that follows. You don't move. Tick 11. That one happens inside you. A shiver that doesn't start in your spine, but in your memory. You remember something that hasn't happened yet. A room full of sideways clocks. A version of yourself without a face. Napoleon, whispering, the 13th hour is when. You wake up on the floor. No one knows how long you were out. The sideways clock ticks. Tick 12. You flinch. Because that means one left. You sit beside it. Place your hand on the wood. It's warm again. Just like before. Okay, you whisper. Let's see what you want. The clock ticks. And time holds its breath. Tick 13 is nothing. No flash. No explosion. No whisper from beyond the folds of space-time. Just you, sitting on the bureau floor, palm resting gently on a clock that no longer ticks. Around you, the world doesn't end. It doesn't even sneeze. The rain continues its slow march across the courtyard windows, and the soft buzz of a tea kettle in the break room hums on like nothing ever happened. But you know it has. You stand up slowly, knees stiff, back aching in that you've meddled with the architecture of reality sort of way. The sideways clock is cool now. Not cold, just settled. You carry it reverently, not nervously, to your desk. Celeste joins you moments later, her eyes ringed with shadow and disbelief. She sees the change too. No more ticking, she asks. You nod. I think it finished. She doesn't ask what it was. Not because she knows, but because you both understand that trying to label it is like giving a nickname to a black hole. Mainstream historical fact: when Napoleon died in 1821, 3 doctors certified his time of death as 5:49 p.m. But a 4th clock in the room, his personal favorite, showed 5:47, stopped forever, frozen at the moment he exhaled. Some historians argue it was a mechanical coincidence. Others claim the emperor took something with him. You take the sideways clock home that night. Not the amplifier. Not the gear. Just the clock. Leclerc objects, naturally. That thing nearly rewrote us out of our own childhoods, he says, biting dramatically into a pickle. But Celeste sides with you. Because whatever it is, whatever it became, it's part of you now. It no longer changes the world. It changes you. And that's enough. Quirky fringe tidbit: in a rural village outside Lyon, there's a legend of a midnight bell that rings once every century. No one alive has ever heard it. But the town still holds a vigil every 100 years, just in case. They say, when it rings, Someone wakes up remembering a life they never lived. You sleep with the sideways clock on your nightstand. It doesn't tick, but sometimes it pulses, like a heartbeat. And each time, you dream vividly. Napoleon again, but older this time. Less commanding, more curious. He's not giving speeches or plotting conquest. He's writing. Quietly. Filling page after page in a journal that seems to erase itself as he writes. You read over his shoulder. The words fade before you can retain them. But you remember one sentence. Control time, and you lose yourself. Accept time, and you find everything. You wake up laughing. Leclerc wouldn't approve of this emotional turn. He'd probably build a machine that slaps anyone who gets too poetic. Celeste, though, she gets it. The next morning, you find her in the lab, rewiring a music box to respond to emotional frequency. I think we can use the sideways clock for good, she says. You raise an eyebrow. She grins. Well, at least for less bad. You nod. Because deep down, you know it too. The bureau, once a fortress of routine and repression, begins to change. Slowly. Softly. Doors stay open a little longer. Staff spend more time talking about dreams than data. You start a new project, the Resonance Initiative. It's not about controlling time. It's about understanding it. Listening to it. Treating it not as a thing to conquer, but a thing to collaborate with. Historians still argue whether the final decades of Napoleon's life were filled with madness or clarity. His writings became increasingly philosophical, even mystical. One fragment reads, "Time bends for no man. But it sometimes nods." You hope that's true. You and Celeste catalogue every weird anomaly you find. The sideways clock never ticks again, but it glows sometimes. Soft, golden. Usually when someone enters the room full of regret. It seems to like people who are trying to change. Leclerc creates a side business selling counterfeit sideways clocks. For ambience, he claims. You don't stop him. In fact, you buy one. It rattles alarmingly when shaken. Months pass. Then years. The world doesn't end. It just continues. You visit St. Helena once, purely out of curiosity. The room where Napoleon died has been preserved, right down to the window latch he used to stare through while thinking deep thoughts or, more likely, judging birds. You bring the sideways clock with you. It warms in your hand. You leave it on the table by his bed for a moment. When you pick it up again, the time has changed. It now shows the exact time of your birth. You whisper, "Thank you." And the wind picks up. Just a bit. Like time exhaling. When you return to Paris, the bureau welcomes you home with soft applause and a small party. Leclerc bakes something allegedly edible. Celeste gives you a notebook titled Days That Might Matter. You write in it every evening. Not much. Just one sentence a day. Sometimes silly, sometimes sad. Day 94. Found a beetle that looks like the amp core. Named it Gary. Day 142. Heard the sideways clock whisper someone else's name. Don't recognize it. Day 207. Forgot what guilt feels like. It was nice. You no longer fear time. You still respect it. And you definitely don't trust it. But you coexist. Because the sideways clock didn't break time. It rewrote your relationship with it. You are no longer its master. Nor its servant. You are its friend. You keep it on your windowsill now. It doesn't tick. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, you hear Napoleon laughing. The sideways clock doesn't blink, but you'd swear on your least favorite bureau paperwork that it sighs softly, like the final note in a long symphony, like the quiet hum of history stretching its limbs after a long nap. You find yourself sitting beside it more often these days, not waiting for something to happen, but just being together. Sometimes you talk to it. Sometimes it listens. It never ticks again. But the glow, soft, golden, always pulsing at the edge of awareness, returns when you're calm. Not euphoric, not focused, but content. One night, it lights up while you're sipping lukewarm tea and reading a letter from Celeste. She's retired now, teaching physics to overly confident teenagers. Her note reads, "We did more than survive the 13th tick. We woke up." You nod, alone in your quiet apartment, and raise your mug in a silent toast. Mainstream historical fact: long after Napoleon's fall, his myth persisted. Paris kept his memory alive with monuments, memoirs, and museums. Some argued he became more powerful in death than he ever was alive. Not as a man, but as time itself, a point of reference, a moment the world revolved around. He would have liked that. Leclerc, of course, still thinks this is all nonsense. He visits occasionally, chewing something pickled and unidentifiable, dropping off boxes of things you forgot you owned, like an umbrella that always opens on the second try, or the amplifier's original casing, now filled with coffee beans. "I named it the Bureau," he says, winking. You throw a pillow at him. He deserves it. Quirky fringe tidbit: a small, unmarked tomb in Corsica is believed by some to contain the original Napoleon. Wild theories suggest the man buried in Les Invalides might be a decoy, part of an elaborate hoax staged by secret societies obsessed with preserving temporal integrity. Most historians roll their eyes, but none have disproved it. Life drifts back into a rhythm. Your new routine is gentler, less urgency, more observation. You pay attention, not just to time, but to people. You start noticing patterns, subtle ones, like how the sideways clock glows brightest when someone in the room makes peace with something. Regret, loss, ambition, their own chaos. It seems to feel those moments. And somehow, you do too. You begin to write again. Not reports, not time logs, stories. Fictional, mostly. But each tale sneaks in one thing you now understand deeply. Time isn't a line. It's a conversation. Sometimes it answers. Sometimes it echoes. But it's always listening. Historians still argue whether Napoleon's obsession with clocks was strategic, symbolic, or simply eccentric. But one letter from exile reveals his deepest fear: I was not made for stillness. Time, when silent, becomes my enemy. You finally understand that line not as paranoia, but as recognition. Time, when silent, forces you to listen to yourself. And that can be terrifying. You visit the bureau less. You still consult, still peek into strange anomalies, but you no longer chase the horizon. You've learned that some mysteries are solved not by dissecting them, but by sitting with them. Stillness is now your friend. That would have terrified old you. Now it feels like peace. You keep a new journal. Inside the cover, a note. If this book survives me, don't try to finish it. Just read it slowly. And maybe listen for the 13th tick. One evening, you find something odd. On your bookshelf, between two books you know you never bought, How to Disappoint a Ghost and Tea and Time Travel, an etiquette guide, is a thin black volume. No title. Inside is handwriting you recognize. Yours. Except you haven't written any of it. Each page is a record of a day you haven't lived yet. You read a few entries. Some are funny. Some are sad. One says, "Tonight, you'll read a strange book. Try not to freak out. Time is just being cute again." You laugh. And then you put the book back. No need to rush. The sideways clock glows. And for the first time in a long while, you realize something very small but very real. You are happy. Not in the way people shout it, or sell it, or chase it. But in that quiet, sleepy way that wraps around your shoulders like a warm blanket and hums, "It's okay now." The sideways clock glows once more, then rests. And so do you. Now, let's ease out of all this, gently. You're no longer in the bureau, or beside Napoleon, or holding a sideways clock with unknowable secrets humming in its heart. You're simply here. Still, soft, safe in this moment. The tick of history has quieted, the gears have slowed, and even the 13th hour has passed without asking you to move faster than you're ready. Let your breath settle. Feel the weight of your body gently press down into whatever surface is holding you. Let your shoulders drift lower. Let your jaw go slack. That's right. There's nothing to chase right now. No more puzzles to solve. No clocks to fix. Just a soft kind of stillness. The kind that doesn't demand anything from you, except perhaps a yawn, or a slow blink, or the quiet courage to rest. Imagine, if you like, that little sideways clock on your bedside table, glowing faintly. Not ticking. Just there. A small, impossible reminder that time doesn't always have to move fast to be meaningful. And in that glow, feel your thoughts slow down. The past is behind you. The future isn't asking anything yet. For now, you're simply drifting in between, held gently by the world, as it hums along without urgency. Let the glow fade, slowly, like the last ember of a long night's fire. You've done enough. You've heard the story. You made it to the end. Time to rest now. Good night.